So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to LIBOR's Wednesday webinar. I'm Marianne Monteleone, Vice President of Professional Development, and we have a very special guest with us today who I have been enjoying speaking with, waiting for all of you to log in, Christy Murdock Edgar. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, giving you all a chance to log in on this, let's see, it's kind of gray outside, gray Wednesday afternoon. Welcome to LIBOR's Wednesday webinar, and we'll let you settle in and we'll welcome Christy. Christy, I would love to introduce you informally, but this resume and bio is just so awesome. Excuse if I read it.
No problem.
Okay. All right, we'll get started as everybody's getting comfortable. As a contributor and educator for leading real estate companies such as Inman, Reminder Media, and Realtor.com, Christy is a trusted leader in real estate marketing. Through her company, Writing Real Estate, Christy writes blogs, property descriptions, websites, and promotional copy that increases traffic and results in higher conversions for real estate agents, brokers, and other professionals. As the marketing mastermind columnist for Inman, she regularly writes about real estate marketing trends and personal branding. As the demands of the real estate industry evolve in a fast-paced digital world, Christy has helped hundreds of professionals stay ahead of the curve by optimizing their platforms and generating new opportunities and leads through the content they create. Christy is the co-author of the book Content Accelerator, which provides a step-by-step process for creating valuable content for social media, blogging, video, podcasts, and more. We are so thrilled to have her here with us today, and we welcome you.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to have been asked, and I'm just excited for us to get started. So we are going to talk today about property descriptions, and that's kind of a really specific topic, I guess. But it is always something that people seem to enjoy. I'm sharing my screen with you now so that I can kind of carry you through and give you a little bit of insight and information on this topic today. So I love to talk about property descriptions because it was sort of the first thing that got me into real estate writing. I had a background in education, and then I had gotten my real estate license, and so I started to put it together when I wrote my first blog post, and my first blog post was about property descriptions. So as you see there, I have a course. I'm a Florida Realtors faculty member, but then I also have a course called Crafting the Property Description, the step-by-step formula for reluctant real estate writers. And I find that there are a lot of reluctant real estate writers because nobody goes into real estate thinking, I'm going to go into real estate so that I can write property descriptions and so that I can, spend all my time blogging and writing a new bio every year and things like that. But people end up really having to do a lot of writing. Real estate is so much about content marketing. Even before we talked about content marketing as a term, real estate agents were doing that already. So we're going to talk today about the 5 mistakes you might be making with your property descriptions, and I'm going to tell you how to fix them. And a lot of times it's really easier than you think. It's just things that I see happening in the industry, things I see on the MLS that people haven't really maybe thought through. And so we're going to talk a lot about just some real specific actionable things that you can do. So here is, just a picture of some houses. And of course, your job as the real estate agent is to make your listing stand out. What can you add to the information that's available that is going to really make people notice that house and really give them something to kind of latch onto. This is see. This is what I always think people look like when they're writing their property descriptions. And I have people who reach out to me and literally say, I hate writing property descriptions. It is the one thing about my job as a real estate agent that I hate. And so I write a lot of property descriptions for people because they say, I'm never doing it again. I found you, I'm never doing it again. But for a lot of other people, they just want to learn how to do it and how to do it better. And so that's what we're going to work on today. So the first mistake that I want to talk about is not writing a description at all. And I don't know if you're surprised by that. I don't know how often that happens where you are. Where I am, I see this all the time, where the property description will either be completely non-existent, just blank, or there will be maybe one or two little items, or maybe there's a call to action, sort of, come see it. This one won't last long, some little phrase like that. And that's all there is. And I think this is a huge mistake for lots of different reasons. Partly, when people do this, what they're thinking is, I have this beautiful professional photography, and that's enough. They can see, I had actually a really good friend and a client say to me the other night, they can see that in the pictures. Well, okay, maybe they can see that in the pictures. I don't know. But the pictures don't tell the whole story. They really don't, even if they're beautiful. I look at a lot of photos of listings. I can't always tell if that countertop is quartz or granite, right? I can't always tell if those floors are hardwood or wood laminate. So there are lots of things that you can't really grab onto just from the pictures. Often I'll see where the pictures are beautiful, but the order is kind of wonky, and I can't always tell what's going on in that picture. Is the what's the flow of the house? Is that bedroom upstairs or downstairs, right? So there are a lot of things that pictures really don't communicate. And so layout, selling points, if there's something really special about that home, sometimes that doesn't really get communicated in the photos. I know I have bought some houses where the thing that sold me on them was nothing that was, in the photos. It was just something special about maybe the storage or the layout or the feel of the house, the feel of the neighborhood. That doesn't always get communicated in the photos. So definitely there's a need for the property description to kind of elaborate sometimes. Photos can't show the updates and upgrades that have happened sort of behind the wall, right? So if there's a new AC, if there is a new roof, if there's, some newer appliances and things, that isn't always communicated in the photos. So you've got to bring that out in the property description. And then the context. There's something about, the drive into the community or the amenities that are there, or the fact that it's walkable to the elementary school. There are things like that that you don't really put across any place other than in the property description or in the live showing. Okay, so no description means that you're leaving a really valuable marketing resource unfinished. And I always say, remember what is happening, and I think we forget this. Remember what is happening when somebody is reading your property description. It's a buyer. They're not looking just at that property and like studying those pictures necessarily. They might be looking at 10 properties all in the same neighborhood, or 10 properties all in the same price range. And they are making a short list. They're comparing those different properties. And part of what the property description does is give them a reason to put that property on their short list and say, okay, we've got to see this one. Okay, this says that it's this. We've got to check that out, right? So you're really giving up valuable marketing space, right? When you don't give a property description or a complete property description. And, I say clients deserve a complete marketing plan. Your listing client needs to know that you are using every possible resource to market their property properly. And if you don't have a property description, that's not happening. So I think it's really important, and I think it's really part of how the client knows that you're taking their listing really seriously. I wonder sometimes when people have no property description, it's almost like, oh, you couldn't say anything nice about my house? That would bother me as a client. And so I think it's really important for you to make sure that the client knows that you value them, you value their listing, and you want to do the very best thing that you can do to get their listing noticed by buyers in the area. Okay, so here is mistake number 2, and it's repeating yourself. Okay, and when I talk about that, I am talking about really repeating things that are already found in the MLS, and I see this a lot. I see it both in those little brief property descriptions, but sometimes I see it in bigger property descriptions where somebody has really taken the trouble to go through and write a nice, robust property description, but they spend the first sentence or two saying things that are already very prominently displayed in the listing itself, in the rest of the MLS entry. Okay, so that might be number of bedrooms. Everybody wants to start there, right? Number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms. Well, the client, or excuse me, the buyer has searched based on probably number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, right? And like when you go look at a portal, you're going to see number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms right there prominently displayed at the top. So there's really no need for you to take valuable room in your MLS description and use it for something like that. It's not going to really add anything, and it's just taking away from the space that you have. I'm trying to think. I think you in New York have, I want to say maybe 1,000 character count for the MLS, and you can confirm that for me. But that's a limited space, and you want to make everything count. In some markets, I know I have one client who has 510 characters on her MLS, and she does not need to be spending any of that time talking about something that they can already find, elsewhere on that listing. So number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, square footage, that's a big one. Now think about character count with square footage, and you're taking up maybe probably 7 or 8 characters to put the number of square feet and then the square feet symbol. So that is something that you don't need to do. That's prominently displayed in the other information there. And then there's other information that's just clearly evident in the listing. Maybe it has something to do with, the location. Maybe it has something to do with some feature of the house that's just very obvious. You do not need to put that in the MLS listing unless it's a major selling point. And then this is one of my favorite things that I think can really help, even if you already write your property descriptions, even if you do a good job with them. This is a way that you can really improve. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is burying the lead. And if you get a handle on this, you can immediately improve your property descriptions every single time. So I know you thought that I misspelled lead, but I didn't. This is a real word. It's LEDE. And it's a newspaper term. When I first went to work right out of college, I went to work for a newspaper for a couple of years. And the lead there is a little, they call it like a slug at the beginning of the story. In the very first paragraph, and if you still read the newspaper, check this out and you'll notice it. At the very beginning of a story, there's a little paragraph that kind of encapsulates in maybe 1 or 2 sentences the main gist of the story, so that people get the context and then they read the details. Okay, so the lead is a newspaper term for that little nugget that kind of gives you a window into the rest of the story. And it's right at the beginning of the article. It's very important. And your editor will send your article back. I know this from experience. Your editor will send your article back if you don't have that lead right up front. So burying the lead is a newspaper term, and it means to take that really important information and bury it somewhere in the story, right? So sometimes, you go to write a story or you go to write a property description and you really haven't thought through what matters most, right? And you've buried some incredible detail way down in the story itself or way down in that property description itself. Okay. And that's a big mistake because you have just a few seconds to grab the attention of your buyer. Remember, they're looking at lots of properties and you want to grab them right up front with that property description and give them something to kind of latch onto to make them read the rest of the property description. And I just don't think 4 bedrooms, 4 baths is going to get anybody so excited that they're going to keep reading, right? So we want to find what is that kernel of excitement, and I call it the wow factor, that's going to grab their attention and kind of hold on to them and carry them through maybe taking a second look at those photos, maybe a closer look, looking at some of the details in that listing description, and then ultimately putting it on their short list and saying, I want to go see this house. So identify the wow factor in your listing. It is the most important kernel of information. So how do you identify the wow factor? And sometimes that is a really easy thing, right? Maybe it is you walk through the front door and it is just this beautiful like open foyer and it just looks incredible and you say, wow, right? That may happen during a home tour. I mean, we've all seen those homes where we literally say, wow. So if that happens when you go for your listing appointment with this client, write that down. That's your wow factor, right? Sometimes it may be that you are going to sit down with that homeowner and you're going to say, tell me what you love about this house. What is the thing? What's your favorite thing? And maybe it is, the view from the balcony. Maybe it is the wraparound front porch. Maybe it's the little breakfast nook in the kitchen and they have their coffee there every day. That's one of those real estate kind of cliches, but it's really true. People have those little special places that they feel cozy, they feel, happy to be there, they feel sort of at home. So wow factor can be anything. Wow factor may be the neighborhood. Okay, it may be that this is like on a cul-de-sac, and this is a family home, and you can just imagine those kids out there playing and just having a great time in this kind of family-friendly neighborhood. For lots of buyers, that's wow factor. That's exciting. So absolutely, wow factor can be lots of different things. If you're in a luxury home, wow factor may be the materials. It may be the craftsmanship. Okay, it may be that there's all kinds of custom work that was done that's really going to add value and that's really going to grab the attention of a really discerning luxury home buyer. Sometimes, and it kind of depends on your market, but I'm going to make this argument and you see if you're going to go with me or not. I think outdoor features are almost always meaningful wow factors. Now, I live in Florida, but I have lived in DC and I've lived in Maryland, and even in places where there are like harsh winters, outdoor spaces are really valued. I spent a summer in Quebec when I was in college, and it was so funny to me. They literally had maybe like 6 weeks of what I would think of as almost spring and summer combined. We were so far north, and it was so cold that even by mid-August, you were freezing. You could not be outside without a coat. I mean, it was really, really cold. And it was just so funny to me that during those few weeks of incredible weather, people were outside all the time. Every single window in every single house was wide open. And people just, they loved being outside. They loved bringing the outdoors in. They were doing work on their house. They were planting flowers. They were having picnics outside. Everybody had a picnic table in their backyard, even though they only used it, just a few times during the year. But that was a really big thing. You would walk down the street and you would hear Celine Dion, I swear, just pouring out of every single house because everybody had all their windows open and all their music playing and everything. It was great. So I think outdoor spaces can be big wow factor, even if you're not, in Florida with a pool and stuff. Even if you're just, having a nice little deck where you can grill in the summertime, that can be, wow factor. Historical interest can be wow factor. And you see this in a lot of, neighborhoods that maybe are the neighborhood is sort of being preserved in some way, or maybe, homes that are on the historical registry. That certainly is a big wow factor. So anything that's like a unique value proposition, anything that's a real selling point that you want to emphasize, that's the place to start. And I would incorporate that into the first line and go ahead and get that up front so that people get excited about that home, and it really differentiates the home from the other homes that they're looking at. Okay, so we're sort of at kind of a halfway point here. So I'm going to check in. And Marianne, do we have any questions thus far?
Let's see. We have, this is such a great topic.
Good.
Yes. A neighbor of a property I had listed saw my listing and said, I really like the way you presented the listing with your description. So I guess we have somebody listening that says this is very, very important, just kind of reaffirming.
I think so. And I will tell you, I know a lot of people, and I think people think of great property descriptions, and especially like having a writer for their property descriptions as, a convenience issue, but really it is a marketing issue. When you say to somebody, not only do I have professional photography, but I, really have professional level, beautifully written property descriptions, whether that's because you've worked at that or whether that's because you're hiring a writer, either way, that is another thing that you can say adds value to your marketing. So I do think that's important, and I know a lot of brokers who actually do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Beth, who is MLS, the staff person, is just reconfirming that, yes, 1,000 characters for the MLS description. So you were right with that.
That's what I thought, which you're lucky, some places don't don't have anywhere near that.
Oh,
so
God.
That's pretty good.
That is good. That is good. And Vicki is asking, do you have any samples of great descriptions that maybe you could share with us?
Because for me, the things that I write become the property of my clients. So I don't keep descriptions. If you go to my blog, writingrealestate.com, go to the blog there, and there's a blog. There are several blog posts on property description, but there's one that's like the ultimate guide, I think, or something like that. And you'll see some samples there that I wrote. Yeah. Kind of walking you through some of those different aspects.
Okay. This may have to be referred to legal, but it said that you had mentioned walking distance to elementary school, and I thought we could not say that.
Okay.
I guess, yeah, so we may have to clarify that.
You can sort of talk about, you should be able to talk about, because there are resources you can appeal to, like walkability or the walkability score. and
Mhm.
things like that. And so you can, you can talk about that. And I know in some neighborhoods where the school is in the community, like planned communities, a lot of times that will be true. So there, you can make those connections in other ways
Yes.
if you can't say that particular phrase.
Yes, and I'll put something out in the questions where we can reference a
Perfect.
resource for everyone. Um, Also, what you're feeling on the photo order on a listing is that's so important, the order of the photos.
I think so. And I subscribe to the same idea that I talk about with property description. Don't bury the lead. Um, in Florida, you see a lot of listings where it's they're wanting to give the context of where the home is in the neighborhood or like in a building, in a high-rise building. And so they'll have 60 photos and 10 of them will be like aerial, drone shots.
Yes.
And it loses me. And I'm writing the description, so I'm interested, but it loses me. Like I get into it and I think, are they ever going to show me the kitchen?
Yes, right.
I want to see some of those things. And so actually, I have one client who always starts with the kitchen. He's a big believer in that,
Mhm.
that's the thing people want to see.
Yes.
I love a view, that's clearly from the home. If a view is a nice selling point, that's a great thing to sort of start out with, or just a beautiful picture of like a great room is great. Or if there's like a beautiful curb appeal, front view, front porch, front door,
Yes.
etc. I think that's a great place to start. I love the idea of taking people on a tour. And every once in a while, you see people who really do this, where you can sort of see this doorway from this picture and go into that room, and it's really
Yes.
clear that they're walking you through the space. I love that for the
Yes.
order. I think there's lots of things that you can do, but I don't like anything where it starts out just showing the same old thing over and over, because I think you lose people.
Yes. We're being asked, does the front view have to be the first photo?
I don't think so at all. Mm-mm. And again, wow factor. What's the wow factor? If the wow factor is a historical home, for example, and it's got a little placard, make that the first photo. You know what I mean? If it is on a gorgeous cul-de-sac, um, show sort of a long view of the home there at the end of the cul-de-sac. I mean, whatever you think is going to be a big selling point. Buyers in your area,
Mhm.
right? And you know what they want. And so figure out like what are they looking for. Now, I will tell you what I don't like is I saw a listing about a week ago and it was the toilet, nice close up of the toilet. And I swear, and that was their first thumbnail. Horrible, horrible. I just,
That's a
ah,
whole webinar in and of itself.
isn't it though?
Isn't that? Yes.
Yes, it is. So yeah, so be careful of things like that where that had to be an accident, surely. But yeah, so something that doesn't give any information, I would say, is what you want to stay away from.
Yes. Interesting question from Vicky. Is writing a description any different from telling a story about the property from the homeowner's point of view?
I think that's the way to think of it. I
Yeah.
really do. You are telling the story of that home. And sometimes it's going to be from the homeowner's point of view. I still say, and maybe it's because I was an agent myself, I think you are the expert because homeowners often are blind to what is going to make their home marketable. Um, I've seen agents who are having me write the description and they're like, well, can you put this in there? And it's something that nobody could possibly care about.
Mhm.
I had one where it was literally like, because I guess they wanted to emphasize that they had maintained the home well. And it was like they were so locked into the idea of having this valve that was replaced on the toilet like 2 years previous,
Right.
and that had to be in there. And I just thought, say no to your client. Your client is wrong, and you're right. You know that nobody cares about that, and you know that that's weird.
Yes.
So tell your client, I will include, and I have one client who does this. She includes a beautiful, just a PDF of bullet points from every single room in the house. So like if somebody wants to get into it and they want to go through every little element, they can do that. And it's an attachment to the listing in the MLS that the agent can pull and give to the client, to the buyer.
That's great.
So that would be a way to do that if they are really locked into like these weird, minute details. But, you know, I think sometimes you have to tell your client, no, that is not the selling point, you know, especially if they've been there for 30 years, right?
Sure.
The selling point now may be very different from what it was when they bought.
Sure.
Yeah.
We want you to continue, but I
Okay.
have to tell you, there's so many people asking, "What's your blog again?" And then I'll
Oh,
put it. Go ahead.
writing, WRITING, realestate.com.
Okay.
And if you Google writing real estate or real estate writing, it comes up.
We'll let you continue.
Okay, no
All right.
problem. Let's see. All right, so here is mistake number 4. And I think this can be really almost as bad as saying nothing, is saying too much. And you don't have this problem probably because you have 1,000 characters. In some places, they have infinite characters or they have like 2,500 characters. And so you're getting into sort of a blog post type territory. And then in some places, like I know Florida is like this, you can pay for an upgraded MLS subscription and it allows you to have virtually unlimited character count. So people get into these really strange things of, you know, saying, like cutting and pasting a newspaper article about the building and making that the property description, or going on and on and on, maybe with some very flowery, you know, language and talking all about where it's not really about the property anymore. It's, you know, you'll be in bliss if you know, walk into this blah, blah, blah. And they get really like they're sort of frustrated poets and they just go on and on with this very over the top description. That's a mistake. And again, you are trying to appeal to buyers. You are not trying to impress your high school English teacher. You are not trying to impress your friends at the book club. You're trying to sell a home, right? And so the things that you include should be about that home. Now, a lot of times a subdivision will have its own website and they'll talk about the amenities, they'll talk about the location, you know, they'll talk about the neighborhood and everything. People will also want to pull from that. That's okay as long as the home is taking center stage. That should not be a substitute for a property description. And I see that sometimes where it's just going on and on and on about the neighborhood, about the building, maybe about even the location, the town, and they're not saying anything about the property. And if I'm a buyer and I'm looking at that, what that says to me is there's something wrong in that house, right? And it may not be true. It may just be that this person doesn't like writing property descriptions, so they just pulled it off, you know, a website. But I'm telling you that reads to the buyer that, oh, the house, you know, maybe something happened, maybe there's something wrong, maybe they couldn't talk about, you know, the house itself because there's a problem. And so it just turns them off. So really make sure that you are not talking about like other things, or that you're not using sort of an elevated character count to, and I don't even know if you guys have access to that, but a lot of places do, to, go on and on, go off on a tangent, because that is not going to get you the results that you want. And it's going to make the buyer feel kind of suspicious. And then here's a big one. And I think a lot of people struggle with this. And I know that a lot of people struggle with this because I see a lot of crazy things on the MLS. Mistake number 5 is failing to proofread. I will never forget when I first realized that this was an issue. I saw a house in the neighborhood, and it had a big kitchen, and apparently instead of big huge pantries everywhere, it had big huge panties in that kitchen. So that was, so embarrassing. And that listing description stayed on month after month after month while that house sat there. And it was like, okay, I guess the agent did not proofread, but I guess the homeowner didn't proofread. And none of the other agents who saw it bothered to say, you might want to change panties to pantries, right? Last week, I saw somebody talking about a resort style puke instead of a pool. So this happens, and you really need to make sure that you are proofreading. And even after it's already up, go back with fresh eyes and look at it one more time. So proofreading is about spelling, which we all think about spelling, okay, revision, and readability. Okay, so from spelling, here's my best tip for you for spelling, especially if you're kind of a weak speller. Read the description backwards. Read one word at a time backwards. And that will at least help you identify those things that are not really words or that don't make sense or that you're thinking, why did I say that? And then when you read it in context, you're like, oh, okay, I spelled it wrong. So read backwards, and that will help you pick out those big, weird spelling mistakes, like pook, right? And then revision. Revision is not fixing little mistakes. Revision is big mistakes, right? So like maybe restructuring the way the whole thing is put together. Am I coming in at the most important part? Am I burying the lead? Did I talk about the kitchen here, but it really makes more sense for me to talk about the outdoor space first because that's related to my wow factor, and then talk about the kitchen. So like maybe moving things around a little bit, that's revision. And then readability, and this is one that I cannot emphasize enough. Some people are so focused on getting every single little tiny detail in that they make that description impossible to read. Not only for the buyer, but even for people, other agents. Like they're using so many abbreviations, and they're just making it so confusing. Or they're talking too much about highly sort of technical things, like I don't really need to know the gauge of the wiring for I'm not an electrician, my home, I want my home inspector to know, right? But I don't necessarily need to know that. I don't necessarily need to know the brand name of the sealant that was used in the, behind the siding, right? I just need it to look good and be nice and be workable and not have problems when I go there. So if you're getting way too in the weeds with some of these things that it's affecting readability, that would be a place for you to maybe revise as well. So check for your errors. And I said here, trade character count for reading comprehension. I'd rather see you give up some details and make it really readable, make it really something that the person can enter into. I try never to play with abbreviations or even like ampersands, in place of the word and. I try to keep my first sentence very readable, as if I were writing an article or as if I were writing a book. I try not to make it awkward and shorten things. I try not to take out the articles because I want it to really draw people in. And then later on, maybe you can do a little of that. But I would really give up character count for a more readable, more engaging, beautiful piece of writing. Um, if you struggle for whatever reason with writing and with spelling or punctuation or things like that, you can find people on Fiverr, on Upwork, who can copy edit, and copy editing doesn't cost as much as hiring a writer. You can hire a writer, but copy editing is a lot more cost effective. So if you say, "Oh, I don't really feel like I can afford to hire a writer on every description," you can hire a copy editor, and they can really quickly look at it and check for accuracy. So Fiverr, Upwork, those are really good places to find somebody for that. Also, if you have somebody, maybe an admin, or maybe your high schooler who writes a lot of papers and is really in that mode of, like, checking over things and everything, they may be completely happy for $5 to, to check your stuff, so look around you for the resources that you have there. And then avoid, as I said, this is a big one, awkward capitalization and confusing abbreviations. I think we all know about confusing abbreviations. People do a lot with capitalization. And sometimes it is capitalizing whole words for emphasis. And I feel like that feels like I'm being shouted out. When I read something and it's like, cabinets, pantries, toilet, I feel like somebody's yelling at me in all caps. So I don't like that. The other really interesting place that I see capitalization is throughout the entire thing. So some people, it's all caps all the way through. And then recently I had a client who hired me to write a property description, and she said, "Well, when you revise it, can you make the first letter of every word capital? I just like the way that looks." And I did it because she's a client, and that's her business. But I don't like that. So I would encourage you to not do things that don't really make sense in your writing. You're not going to impress anybody by shouting at them for 1,000 characters, in all caps. And you're really going to confuse them with the first letter of every word thing. So I wouldn't do either of those things. And then, and I actually know a writer who told me last week, he refuses. He tells clients, "I will not do that." And then the other one is, and I get this question sometimes, don't go crazy with the exclamation points. Some people have exclamation points all the way through, like everything's super exciting, and it doesn't really do anything. And some people, it's like a line of exclamation points. That is not helpful, and it's taking up characters that you could be using for other things. So I always say you get one exclamation point if you have to. I rarely use exclamation points myself, but if you feel like there's a real compelling reason, like maybe there's a call to action at the end and you want to emphasize it, I will allow you one exclamation point, no more. So if you're trying to put in two, there's something wrong. So go back and write it more exciting so that you don't have to pretend it's exciting by just tacking an exclamation point on over and over and over. Okay, that's my real hard and fast rule on exclamation points. Okay, and so now questions again, and whatever you would like to talk about, we can talk about it, and just let me know.
Okay, Christy, we have a question. It
Okay.
says, I see a lot of agents capitalizing things they want people to focus on. And what are your thoughts on this? I find it can sometimes be confusing because the big words are almost screaming at you.
I 100% agree. Yes, that's exactly what I think. I taught like literary theory and analysis for almost 20 years. And I used to tell my students, if you feel that you have to italicize or do something to the font to make something stand out, you've written that sentence wrong. right? There are ways that you can bring attention to things without, drawing a circle and an arrow and all caps and an exclamation point. So what I suggest is, maybe start the sentence with that word. Like if what you want to emphasize is oversized seated bar in the kitchen, instead of saying, kitchen boasts a lovely oversized seated bar, you can say an oversized seated bar enhances the open space of the kitchen, right? So you can start the sentence with that item rather than putting it in the middle and then, making it all caps.
Yes. About your blog, what does your blog address? So if we all go to the blog, we start following you.
It's almost all writing, marketing, content. So it's everything that I write, honestly, it comes from either something that I have encountered in doing some client work, or something that I'm sort of seeing in the marketing space. So most of it is, I think right at the beginning of the pandemic, I wrote a couple of things on like how to talk to people about the pandemic and stuff like that. I wrote a couple of those kinds of things, but for the most part, it's all writing and it's all, everything I do is real estate. I mean, it's right there in the name, writing real estate. I don't really do content for other industries. I do content for real estate and affiliates like, mortgage companies and things like that.
Okay, great. So I think a lot of us will be going there. So Alice is asking, I missed mistake number 3.
Let's see. Mistake number 3. I have to go back and look myself. Saying too much. So that's like sometimes MLSs will give you expanded MLS for an extra fee, or sometimes you're working with maybe a brochure or something like that, and people will go on and they're not really talking about the property anymore, right? They're talking about the neighborhood, or they're talking about the building, or the town or something else. You really want to keep your focus on the home itself, because generally what happens is when you're talking about everything but the house to buyers, that seems to mean there's something wrong with the house, right? And I have certainly seen listings, and I've written for listings where they started, maybe an investor bought it, they started renovating, they got into the weeds, and now they're having to get out and there's no kitchen. And so it's why I always tell people, I feel like a kitchen is an essential element. Even if that kitchen is not great, you need to talk about it, because the assumption buyers make is there's no kitchen, or there's something really wrong with the kitchen. Right. So same way, when you're talking about everything but the house, it's a problem. It sounds like there's something wrong. One of the very first things that I ever wrote about in terms of property descriptions was a house that a friend of mine sent me the listing description for. And she's a real estate agent right outside of DC. And it was $1 million mansion, really nice house. And the first line was walking distance to Safeway, which is the grocery store. Mm-hmm. And I thought, if I'm buying $1 million house, why am I walking to Safeway? Like, why would that be the thing that they think is compelling and exciting about this house? It really either made it seem like the agent did not know what they were doing, or that there was something so fundamentally wrong with that house mm-hmm. that that's all they could think of to say, So be careful of these kind of, outside things, and especially be careful of leading with that,
Sure. This is an interesting question. It says, I have a property that needs complete updating, and the seller loves it and doesn't understand why buyers wouldn't love the house as it is. Yeah. So how can I write a description that doesn't upset the seller, but lets a buyer know that there is updating to be done?
I think that you've got to first have a really honest conversation with the seller. And that's very difficult. And I know that nobody wants to do that. And I think you can put it in a way that is sort of marketing related. And we talk about this a lot with staging. You know, your home is beautiful and it's very livable. And I know that you enjoy it and it works really well for you. But, you know, a lot of times buyers are looking for brand new, or they are looking for some updates in these different areas. And we need to just let them know that they will be making those themselves. I think one reason to do that is not just because of the property description. I think you need to have that conversation because those buyers are going to say something and they're going to come back with, you know, questions after the home inspection, or they're going to ask for a credit at closing. I think that that's a possibility. So I think the more you can say up front, the better. And then I think the other thing that you can do is frame it in such a way that you're saying, um, those phrases that we say that are code, and everybody knows their code. Make it your own, create your dream kitchen kind of thing. You may have to do that. Failing all of that, you're just going to have to keep it very nuts and bolts, plenty of cabinet space, plenty of counter space, window over the sink. You're just going to have to kind of give it this is what it is, and not get into making false promises. But I think really, and I know it's so difficult, but I think really the very best thing you can do for the entire transaction as a whole is going to be to have maybe a reality check with that seller.
Mm-hmm. Makes complete sense.
I'm glad I don't have to do it. I'm sorry.
I have a lot of questions here about, what they can and cannot say, which we'll get that to the attendees.
Right.
Based on one key and LIBOR. Other than that, a lot of thank yous. And I will tell you that, so that everybody knows that's listening, we will have Christy back on blogging. I think everybody is ready to kind of tap into that platform. And Christy has agreed to come back and give us a lesson on how to start your own blog.
And let me tell you that the last stat that I saw from NAR, only 11% of agents have anything remotely related to a blog. Maybe they started and they quit after one, just any scope of a blog. So there's a lot of room out there for blog. It feels like everybody has a blog, but they don't.
No. Okay, so we'll do the first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so very much. Everybody's
thank you
in the comments, and really has been a pleasure. And thank you for your time. And we look forward to having you back.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.